Hello and welcome to Move Conversations. This is your host Venkat. In this episode, we talk to Rajiv Nigojkar. Rajiv is a fellow IFTN, a successful entrepreneur in jewelry exports, and runs his own company called RGN Global Enterprises. My co-producer Mrigank and I were classmates of Rajiv at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. Welcome to Move Conversation Trade Stuff, Rajiv.
Thank you, Venkat. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. So let's begin with the start of your career journey. I remember that, you and I did the same, internship together. Then subsequently, both of us had, Africa backgrounds and so on and so forth. So the last thing I at least personally ever thought that you would go into would be jewelry business, right? So it's very interesting. How did you get started in this?
Yeah, as you know, we interned together in Bombay, and then after that, I joined a pharmaceutical company and ended up in Africa thereafter to set up a pharmaceutical plant, which
Mm-hmm.
didn't take off because the company that wanted to set it up had some problems with the local partners. And then I switched jobs and I joined the Churchgate Group and worked there for several years. While I was in Africa, I started a company in 1993,
Mm-hmm.
and thereafter came across when I was planning to come back to India, I came across certain situations which pushed me into the jewelry business.
Mm-hmm. So, but then
So
it doesn't randomly happen that did something happen in Africa? There are always legendary tales about like how people have sometime God given opportunities happening in Africa or anything like that happened. And which year was that? When you got
yes,
inspired to do something relating to
this was this was I think 1994 or 95, around 94
right,
when I had actually set up a cotton ginning plant with American technology and machinery
right,
in the state of Minna, in the state of in a place called Kontagora in Niger State in
right.
Nigeria in the north.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so we had this factory already running, and the directors were still there. The American directors were still there who were looking after the final parts of it, and we had a Australian manager at the factory, and we had a guest house
Right.
that used to house and feed us, So
Yeah.
while having lunch there along with my chief manager, chief engineer rather, uh, a local gentleman came and tried to sell me a stone,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no idea about any stones at that point of
Right.
time. And he said, "There's something very expensive, and would you like to buy?" So I was
Mm.
least interested because I was so busy with the project, and I told him I'm not interested. And he said,
True.
"No, you just keep it.
Mm.
Give me a bottle of beer and keep this." So I said, "You're free to have a bottle of beer, but I don't need the stone." So he
Right.
sat there, got a bottle of beer from the fridge, and finished his beer. And he said, I'm going to leave this with you. When you go
Uh,
to India, take it with you and see what happens."
right.
So I reluctantly took it and put it in a bag, and I forgot about it. Then my first daughter was to be born, and that time my wife traveled to India, and she needed a bag. So, as
She
luck would
took
have it,
this.
it was that particular bag that I gave her, and I found that stone in it.
Right.
And I told her that this is something a guy gave me in Kontagora, and why don't you take it home and see what is all this about? I tell my father because so my father knew somebody who was a diamond trader in Bombay. He was his ex-colleague in the university. My father was a professor, but he had
Right.
left his job and started diamond trading, and he had grown to an extent that he had offices in New York
Around the
and
world.
Japan and Hong Kong. So that
Yeah.
stone was shown to them the next day morning when my wife landed in Bombay, and they were very excited. It was a very large aquamarine, which is
Okay.
very expensive, and I
Right.
got it for free almost just for a bottle of beer.
Right.
So this guy, the son of this gentleman, he called me.
Yeah.
I was in Nigeria, and he said that where did you get this? And I'm very interested. I said somebody came and gave it to me, and if you want, you come over and we'll go to the mine. Meanwhile, I found out, and there was a 5 kilometer away from our side, there was a aquamarine mine. So that got me interested in this. And when I decided to come back to India, my father already knew, so he had done some research. He found a newspaper cutting where there was a geology course
Right.
being conducted by one Mr. Peshwa. He was generation of the Peshwa of Pune, you
Peshwas.
know.
Right.
Yeah. So I met Mr. K.V. Peshwa, and he was a geologist, and he used to take gemology courses. And I did a brief course, 3 month course, and I did some diamond grading. It was just a hobby, you know. But in that process, I was wanting to do something, of course. So I wanted to do a business in India. I was exploring. So after that, I got more interested in this field, and the journey started. You know, basically, I
Wonderful.
found
Wonderful.
some
So,
more information. Yeah, go ahead, please.
right. So then you, moved on and, subsequently set up your own gem and jewelry company. And then you went back to Africa to explore that. And, then you started making jewelry. So how did that move on? Like how did that journey take off? And what were your initial experiences?
Right. My initial plan was to trade in gemstones from Africa because I had the Africa background
Yeah.
and India background. So I went back to Africa. This time I went to East Africa. I went to Tanzania, the famous Arusha mines of Tanzanite. And I went to Malawi. I met a lot of people. I met some Europeans who were living in the villages there and mining with their teams. And
Right.
people used to come from Italy and France in chartered planes and used to buy gemstones from there, very rare
Right.
gemstones. But all that trade was extremely risky and a lot of cash dealings, and people were shot dead and things like that. There were some Indians who were shot also.
Right.
So
Unfortunate, huh? Really. That's Africa, but
I
yeah.
had little children, and yeah, I had little children. I didn't want to take that risk, so I came back to India, and I instead tried to get into jewelry manufacturing.
Okay.
So I went to
Okay.
Jaipur, and Jaipur was the center for gemstone trade and gemstone jewelry
Right.
manufacturing. And I got some gemstones from there. I remember
Okay.
I spent about 70,000 rupees and got some gemstones. And then it was difficult to find karigars or workmen who will make the jewelry. But somehow I struggled to find a small team of workmen, and I made some samples out of it. It was a learning process. After doing that, I started selling in Pune as through exhibitions. You
Okay.
know, uh, and I did get some customers and all, and it was going okay. You know, nothing great about it. But then uh, one fine morning, I got a call from a very old friend who was in the US. He was a guy from BITS Pilani where I studied. He had also done engineering, and we were together there. He was a good friend, and he somehow got my number and he called me and he came home and stayed with me for a few days. And then he said, "You're doing nothing much. Why don't you come to US? We'll do a business together." He already had a software business, so he had a development center and a Microsoft training authorized training center in Atlanta. So I ended up in Atlanta, but I took my jewelry samples with me in a bag with no intention of really taking jewelry business very seriously. I went there to start or join him in his software business,
Right.
and we did pretty well. He already had a good center running, and I started handling his marketing part, and I got the Coca-Cola World Headquarters contract.
Wonderful.
So it was going well, but then as things would move, his wife came back from India. She was on leave in India, and she didn't. They had a difference of opinion whether to take a third partner. They were partners in that business,
Fair enough.
and since they had this difference of opinion, I exited
Moved
that
on. Yeah.
after 2 months of hard work, and did try to do some sales of jewelry in
Okay.
Atlanta,
Okay.
but without much success.
Right.
And there was another friend from BITS Pilani who was my classmate, and he was in Kansas City. So he called me and said, okay, it's not working out in Atlanta. Why don't you come here? We do something together. So I went to Kansas City, and we did again try to. He was also into software, so he said, let's try software. We were again trying software. But then in the evenings, I told him that why don't we just try to sell some jewelry here?
Okay.
And we were going in the evenings, you know. So after a month or so, nothing was working out, and I finally decided that I'll go back to India. I will see something there. But just before I left for India, about a week before my flight was booked, I made this fateful call, and I I used to make calls from the Yellow Pages, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I made this call, and there was this guy called Jerry Kelly who came online, and I used to read out my
Pitch.
written little uh, text to everybody I used to call.
Yeah.
And I
All of
read
us
it
are
out to
salesmen,
him.
right?
Yeah. So Jerry said, so what are you doing here? I said, I'm here to sell jewelry. So he said, okay, come on Monday morning at 10 o'clock. We'll talk about it. And I went there, and it was a very interesting meeting. They had just started a company few years ago, and his wife and her friend used to run that company. They had just one employee who was at the reception, and these two girls they used to go to Mexico and get jewelry and sell in parties. They used to call their friends for parties at
Yes.
home, and they used to come to
Similar to
sell jewelry.
Tupperware
So
parties,
they
right?
had just
In
started off,
US.
and yes, and Jerry was a MLM
Okay.
guy. He had a business. His father had a business, but they went bankrupt, and he joined the company as a manager. So he had the expertise in MLM, and he finally joined these two girls, and they started a full-fledged MLM company, a party plan network company rather.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I met them at a stage when they were still buying only from Mexico. They used to go to Mexico, choose pieces, and come and have parties to sell them. And when I met them, they didn't have much knowledge about gemstones. We spent the whole day talking about jewelry. They learned a lot from me about gemstones, and they saw my jewelry. They were very impressed. It was jewelry that they wanted, but they never could lay hands on. So at the end of the day, around 4 o'clock, they gave me an order of $10,500, and that started my journey. I came back to India. It took me 6 months to get my company registration and IEC code and GJEPC registration and all that, because I had no idea about the business.
Right. Right.
But then it
So
all happened, and Jerry got impatient. But I told him, hold on. I was very honest with him. I told him this is the first time I'm going to export, and he gave me that much time. He had given me some advance also. And then we sent our first shipment, and they were very happy with it. So it started, you know.
wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
And then who all they continued to be a client, and you added more people? Were any famous names that you sold to?
Oh yeah, I meanwhile had started. I already had started a software development center in Pune, and also Tata Infotech authorized training center. So that was still my main business, and this was a side business. But then in year 2000, around that time, 2000, 2001, the dot-com, the bubble burst, and we didn't get students, and we didn't get orders, and I had to shut down the
All of
Infotech
that, yeah.
business.
So you focused
And
on
then what
slowly.
happened is, by that time, this business had grown to about $35,000, not much. But I said, let me focus on this first. Meanwhile, I tried a lot of other businesses as well. But this business had a kind of steady growth. In the third year, he gave me a $65,000 order. And by the time I shut down everything, and I went back to meet him in US and explore other avenues for jewelry business. So he gave me a $250,000 order, which was
Fantastic.
quite big in those days. So then I said, okay, this is serious business, and I can grow it to multi-million-dollar business.
Right.
So
Right.
I started focusing on that completely. I shut down all other businesses, and I focused on that, and I finished that $250,000 order. And then he gave me $1 million order in the next year, and then became a multi-million-dollar thing. I mean, the journey was very difficult. It was not easy because to find infrastructure, suppliers, the
Yep,
right
yep, yep.
quality and all that. It was a learning
Works, right?
experience, but it was fun.
Right, right.
Looking
So
back, it was
other
fun. At
than
that time, it was.
other than Jerry, did you get any other famous names on your?
Oh yes, after that, Jerry's company Silpada became one of the largest sellers in the world for silver jewelry. They
Wow.
focused on silver jewelry, and I
So
was doing
you
silver
grew
jewelry.
with them, they grew with you.
Yes, space. But then they found so many other suppliers from all over the world, including
True,
Germany,
true.
Israel, China, India.
Yeah.
They grew very fast, and I grew with them. And then I found other customers. I started participating in shows, jewelry shows around the world in Hong Kong and Tucson and Las Vegas. And I found other customers. I mean, people came looking for us because they knew that this is a major supplier for Silpada. So people used to come to, for example, QEC came to know about us, and QEC USA, which is one of the largest companies there at that time for jewelry, they came to
This is
visit
the
all the
television,
booths.
right?
And
Based on television
yes, it's a
show, like
television
program.
company. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So then we started working with QEC and Silpada, and then the business was growing faster than our infrastructure. And then
Wonderful.
the time came when social compliance became very important for US companies. There were some new laws passed by the US government, and any supplier beyond certain values would have to have socially compliant factories to supply to large US companies. And we didn't have a socially compliant factory at that time because we were still a small player.
Right.
So our company failed in social compliance. Silpada stopped working with us. The bad times started, and then 2008 came, and there was a dip in the market, and
Yeah, financial
there
crisis,
was
right?
financial crisis. So we had lots of problems. But what saved us was my strategy of having a parallel business in the real estate. So
Okay.
whatever money we were earning and were not investing, it was spare money we were investing in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing some land deals, trading in lands, and around 2005-6 was a good time for real estate.
Right.
When prices were doubling every year. So when we came into financial problems due to the financial crisis, we had loans on the factory which was coming up. We had to pay back loans, and we didn't have customers, we didn't have orders. So we leveraged on real estate. I sold a piece of land, 3 acres of land, where prices had shot. I had invested some crore rupees, and I sold it for more than 6 crores. So that gave us a lot of liquidity.
So
And
that
that
helped you
liquidity we used.
the downward phase, right? To come out of your downward phase. That helped you come
Yes,
out of it.
exactly. I used that liquidity in finishing the factory. And then when the factory was completed, then we had to struggle to get back customers, and we got some new customers as well. And then Silpada came back. Meanwhile, Silpada was sold by our original owners to Avon. Avon could not run it. It was sold for some $630 million, and Avon could not run it, so they auctioned it back. And the original owners, Jerry and his wife and others, they bought it back for some $80 million.
Great.
And
So
now,
you went through this phase, right?
yes,
And you became socially compliant, and you could supply back to all these people,
yes,
right? So
yes, yes,
so do you want to give us an idea of so social compliance was one issue about the Indian jewelry landscape that you have pointed out to
yes,
me, that
yes,
you not only you but many other companies in jewelry, and
yes,
probably many other labor intensive exports would have been non-compliant on the social issues, like for the
yes.
US, right? Any other notable things about the jewelry export landscape before we move on to the post to the modern
Yes,
era?
right. Yes. When I started, internet was still in nascent stage.
Mm,
We
mm,
used
mm,
to send fax messages. We used to emails were not very common,
mhm,
and internet had not boomed at that time. And
mm.
so because of lack of knowledge that buyers had, and we had the knowledge of suppliers, So
Right.
we were able to make a lot of money in terms of just trading,
Right.
without much infrastructure. So we
Right.
were buying, for example, chains from a supplier in Agra, and we were just trading. We used to get the box, change the label, and export it and make double our money. And for that also they used to pay us advance. So we, without much of investment, we were making a lot of money.
Mm.
So those were the good days. But then
Mm.
when internet came and it became a great leveler, everybody came to know everything, and the jewelry shows started, and people started going to jewelry shows, and internet came, and internet through internet they came to know who are the manufacturers and all that. So we lost all that advantage of lack of information that European and American buyers had,
Right.
and then we had to really compete in terms of quality, in terms of timely supplies, in terms of prices. So
Right.
it was
And regulatory
not easy.
compliance.
Yes.
Right. Right.
So that was a tough time. But then, yeah, we had the infrastructure. We had a very large factory, which we still have, and it was completely socially compliant, and we had a lot of space and infrastructure and everything under one roof. So we did succeed finally in getting new customers, and of course, we had to be very innovative in terms of designing as well.
Right.
We
Right.
had to tap of the market and have a design team. Then we had to automatize everything. Uh, CAD designing came in, camming came in,
Mm-hmm.
and automation came in, all that,
Mm-hmm.
So
So
the
at this
scene
stage,
changed
maybe
entirely.
maybe for some of us to understand your industry better, you talked about design, you talked about CAD CAM, and you talked about
Yeah.
um, the automation and so on. So let us help us understand what are the steps in your jewelry manufacture.
Okay. It starts with the raw metal, that is
Okay.
silver or gold, or base metal brass,
Mm-hmm.
if you are into that kind of jewelry. Uh, and then from there you make you go to casting, you cast the metal, or you hand work on it. There are two
Okay.
ways. One is casting, one is hand working.
Okay.
So handmade jewelry has its own market. A lot of people like handmade jewelry. It has a different
Mm-hmm.
look. After that, it's I'm just going to be brief because
Yeah, sure.
So after casting, you go to filing. Filing, after filing, it's polishing, stone studding, and plating. Finishing,
Okay.
quality control, and
Mm-hmm.
packing. That's it.
Okay. That's
So
those are some of the
that's it.
steps.
It's
Yeah.
not as simple as it appears from my talk, but yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the basic steps. Yeah.
Right. Basic. No, we'll revisit them probably when we talk about technology and so on.
Yeah.
So, just to get a basic understanding of what happens,
Right.
So which are the major countries that make jewelry and export them, and, which are the major importers?
India is a major player in jewelry industry. It has been
Mm-hmm.
traditionally a major player. Apart from India, there's China,
Mm-hmm.
there's Thailand,
Mm-hmm.
Indonesia, Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
to some extent Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Germany, they were masters in gemstones, but that market is now taken over by India and China.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Italy. Italian jewelry is very, very uh, well received in the
Mm-hmm.
market, and they have very high quality and premium jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
They're still a big player.
Mm-hmm.
So Israel, uh, Mexico, these are some of the countries that are major players in jewelry manufacturing. And the buyers, as usual, US is an ocean. It's a very big market. Apart from US, it is Germany, France, UK,
Mm-hmm.
Japan, Australia,
Mm-hmm.
the Western markets. India
Right.
and China are also very big markets, but India usually makes its own jewelry and you sell in the local market.
Right.
Same thing with China, but nowadays a lot of Italian jewelry is being imported also from Thailand. So the scene is changing.
Right. So there's one more thing which I thought I should understand. You talked about earlier about brass, silver, and gold. you're talking about how Italian jewelry is at a premium end. You talked about Mexican jewelry and other countries. So what are the categories of jewelry? What should we know? What are the categories of jewelry? How do you know
Imitation
so
jewelry,
okay,
broadly imitation jewelry and precious metal real jewelry.
okay,
Broadly, those are the two categories,
okay.
right?
Mm,
Now, in precious metal jewelry, we have gold jewelry, silver jewelry, studded and plain jewelry, diamond studded jewelry, precious stone studded jewelry, and semi-precious stone studded jewelry. And in
okay,
imitation, you have base metal like pewter and brass,
okay.
and you have imitation stones or beads,
Hmm.
and some plain jewelry as well. So those are the broad categories,
And which of these are competitively produced in India? We know that gold and jewelry, gold and silver jewelry is traditionally produced in India. What else are we competitive and what
Yeah.
else are we not competitive?
India produces almost all categories of jewelry.
Okay.
It also produces a lot of gemstones. It
Mm,
also cuts 9 out of 10 diamonds traded in the world. So India
mhm,
has a major role. You
mm.
know, we make a lot of diamond jewelry. We make a lot of loose diamonds as well, silver jewelry, gold jewelry. Our exports are very high,
Mhm,
and we have a large market domestically as well. So
mm.
India is a major player, and we are competitive in everything. Except China has a lot of automation. It has brought in a lot of automation. So they have succeeded in different areas. You
Okay.
know, the gemstone industry is very highly automated.
Mhm,
So their product is very consistent. Our
mhm.
product is still not that automated and is not very consistent.
Okay.
So automation is coming in, but there is a gap between the engineering industry in India and the jewelry industry. There is not much of intermingling, and therefore there is a problem of automation coming in very quickly into India. But
Okay.
it will
So let me
happen gradually.
let me split that into two parts. First, one part I want to understand is what has China automated in terms of actually in terms of gemstone and jewelry manufacture.
The
That's part one.
processes, for
Okay.
example, gemstone industry in India is still very
And
labor intensive, and
right.
everything is a lot of it is done by hand.
Okay.
But they have automated machines. You
Okay. So
know,
that will come and place the stone in the
yes, it
automated.
it,
Okay.
it produce those machines produce a large number of stones in a very short period and with a lot of consistency.
Oh, the production of
India
the
still,
stone itself has been automated. The cutting, everything has been automated.
yes, yes,
Okay. And
correct.
also embedding.
So embedding, no, embedding, well, to some extent, yeah. In India also we are doing what you call as wax setting, which means
Okay.
you set the stone in a wax piece, and then when the casting comes out, it is already setted with stones, which we
Oh,
often do for diamonds in our factory and for
mm,
some other gemstones. But due to the high temperature of casting, a lot of gemstones cannot withstand those temperatures and they spoil. So you cannot do that. But other than that, a lot of for
cutting is automated.
sorry, for
No, you
gemstone
said
setting, it
mm,
still involves a lot of
manual labor.
labor,
Right.
labor
So
intensive.
cutting a
Yeah.
lot of it, you said China has automated. Are they able to get that kind of lovely cuts and consistent cuts and the light falls through and the good effects?
Yes.
Are they
Yes.
able to bring out those things?
Yes. They are able to do a lot of bring in a lot of consistency in the gemstone process. Also, they have very large factories of jewelry manufacture as
Mm-hmm.
compared to India.
Mm-hmm.
India, as usual, has large number of smaller factories, but they have very large factories.
Right.
So their production capacities are very high in individual factories. Now, India
Right.
also has larger factories, but they have a certain advantage. But India still has an advantage in certain areas. For example, designing. You know, Indian designs are different. Indian designers have a different mindset, but
Okay.
that they still need to go a long way because we still have to compete with Italians in designing, for example.
Right. The other point that we talked about and was about the disconnect you feel because India, Pune, where you come from, and other parts of India have, various automotive and other engineering industries they're famous
Yes.
for, and a lot of automation has taken place.
Yes. Correct.
So you were referring to the thing that there is that disconnect,
Yes.
between the gem and jewelry industry, which can benefit from automation, and the
Correct.
industrial automation, in which India is not that bad, and given these
Yes.
same areas
Yes.
where these things are done, western
Right.
part of India. So
Yes.
briefly, in a few minutes, just help us understand where is that, and why is there that missing disconnect, and what can be done to make that connection. We also think they are two
Right.
different industries.
Well, one little problem with jewelry industry is that the industry is dominated even now by traditional jewelry families, jeweler families. So
Unlike you're
they
a
have
professional,
been,
management
yeah,
professional. Yeah,
I'm a first generation entrepreneur and I
right.
started jewelry industry. It's very rare, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So there are
So
very few companies like Tanishq which are professionally managed companies, not family owned
yeah,
businesses.
right.
So most of even the larger jewelry manufacturing companies are family owned businesses. So
Right.
second, third, fourth generations are running those businesses. So there's a mindset that is still there, and the idea of exploring automation and all that is not. Uh, they are not very receptive to that.
Okay.
So we have automation in engineering industry, automobile industry in India, but that has not entered into jewelry industry because of the mindset. So but that
Okay.
will change with the new generation coming in, you know, but it is taking too long in my view. It should
Okay.
happen much faster. That has happened much faster in China, and therefore they have an
Okay.
advantage.
Right. Right. Okay. So that helps us to understand better. So it's a the industry's mindset issue, leadership
Yes.
mindset issue. It's not that
Yes.
the Indian engineering industry is unwilling to collaborate or something like that. That is not the
No,
problem.
not at all.
No.
Not at all. They will be happy to collaborate. I try to do those few things, and uh, I tried to get some people from here to repair my Italian machinery, German machinery, and they were able to do it
Hmm,
at a fraction of cost.
hmm, hmm.
So so that more of that interaction has to take place.
Right.
No?
Right. That's wonderful. I think that gives us a better understanding of where it
Yes.
is. Thank you for joining us in yet another episode of Move Conversations. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the Move Conversations YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get notifications of new episodes. Thank you very much. Till I see you in the next episode. Thank you very much. Have a great day.